with a lot of like technical objects such as
Right.
PPF, RF,
Right. Right.
and maybe other functional modules that are like used in standard apps or maybe
Right.
classes. So,
Right.
and also like the EWM tables, like how this stock
Mm-hmm.
is getting. If we, let's say, if we have to build a report based on the physical stock or maybe HU history, or let's
Correct.
say if a user is asking to pull me all the deleted HUs and see the history for like past week, how do
Right.
I build a report or
Correct.
maybe a custom RF transaction based on that?
Correct.
So yeah, these kind of scenarios, like let's say if you're explaining PPF, so
Right.
we need some use cases of how the PPF is being used
Correct.
based on the tech, like based on the custom objects, not just the standard ones,
Correct.
and
Correct.
how we can customize it further or add our conditions or filters, right?
Right.
And if there are any additional fields which needs to be added to the catalog, how do we do that?
Right.
Yeah, and of course RF custom screens, I think already. And let's say if we have to modify the standard put away rules or picking rules or maybe
Right.
sorting rules, how do we go about doing those changes? So
No, correct.
yeah.
I understood your requirement, right? But today's agenda I have kept at a very high level. So let us go through that. But I still understood your question. So what I will do is once we complete this agenda, right, I'll try to answer the questions that you have raised, for example, related to tables or, how do we really enhance the technical objects into SAP AWM. Try to answer that questions by end of this session. Okay. So now, since I believe you as you have given a brief background of yourself, right? You already know SAP EWM, so it's nothing new that I have added into this introduction slide. But as you know, right, SAP EWM is nothing but it's a supply chain solution which is provided by SAP software, and then this is similar to what we were used to do in the warehouse management, but with some additional advantages or additional processes that we usually do not find into the regular warehouse management. So this slides briefly explain you about what is SAP EWM. And since you are of functional background, right, I assume that you are pretty much aware of what is SAP EWM. So just to go from the to the technical point of view in SAP EWM, right, I just wanted to start my session with some deployment options. Okay, now whether it is a functional consultant or a technical consultant, from for me, the important aspect of SAP EWM is to understand the landscape or the deployment mechanism that is used in each and every business scenario, right? So we usually have two different mechanism, right, or landscape we would say into SAP EWM. One is decentralized and the other is embedded landscape. So whether you work with SAP S4HANA or SAP ECC, right, both these SAP systems can be having a landscape which is called as decentralized and embedded. Now, how does decentralized and embedded system works, and why I wanted to take this as part of my agenda is because as part of technical as being a technical consultant, right, there could be some areas of development wherein the business business is using a decentralized landscape or the business is using a embedded landscape, and we came across a situations, right, where we wanted to enhance something while the delivery is getting distributed at the time in the decentralized landscape, or if we are having some custom fields into a material master. So how do we transport that custom field from ECC to EWM system with the decentralized landscape? So in order to go ahead with that all points into a technical EWM world, right, we will have to understand how SAP can be or how SAP EWM can be deployed into the SAP ECC system. So whether it is HANA or the regular ERP system, we can have two separate boxes which is called as a decentralized landscape. So in this case, ERP has their own set of operations going on. In EWM will be an individual box where we will be performing the warehouse management operation. In embedded area, landscape, we will be having the S4 or the ECC system along with an EWM and a system add-on into it, right? So What is the major difference between these two landscapes? So if you see, right, uh, just to give you an example of the master data and the transactional data. So when we work with embedded system, right, we will be having the master data, which is already available with our single system, right? Oh, okay. Are you not seeing the slide for deployment options?
No.
Oh, sorry, sorry. Let me stop sharing. I'm really sorry. One second. Okay, now are you able to see this slide? Introduction to SAP EWM.
Yes. Yes, Darshan.
Okay. Sorry for that. So I already covered this and I was talking about this deployment options, right? So since you two are already from the EWM background, you know, right? We usually work with decentralized landscape or embedded landscape. Now, what is the major difference that we see apart from the physical, having a physical server, either a independent server of for EWM or a integrated EWM add-on into the SAP ECC server, right? So apart from this physical differentiation or identification, what is the difference that we see onto the process point of view, right? So if you see, right, from the transactional data point of view, whether it is inbound or outbound, sorry, okay, okay. So from the transactional data point of view, right, whether it is inbound or outbound, if we are into an embedded landscape, if I can give you an example, right, we have something called as inbound delivery notification document created into EWM system. So whenever we are into the embedded world, we will not have this inbound delivery notification document created. So which is usually a duplicate document in the embedded world. But whereas when we are into the decentralized landscape, right, we will have this inbound delivery notification document created as soon as the delivery is distributed into in EWM system. Now, what is the use of this notification document? It's basically a replica of what is created into the ECC system, right? So if anything goes wrong into the EWM system, the notification document remains into the block state and it doesn't create any inbound delivery document. Similar things happens to the outbound process also. So the main thing is this transactional data. Master data, instead of core interface, we will have the direct access to the master data if we are working into the embedded system. When we are working with the decentralized system, right, we will have to distribute or we will have to sift this master data to the EWM system. Now, apart from this functional or process differences, right, in your experience or in your future work related SAP EWM work related business scenarios, right, you might come across some situation, right, where there is a requirement from the business to enhance something whenever this the delivery is getting distributed into the decentralized landscape, or to you know send some custom fields which are added into the master data or business partner from ECC to EWM. So in that situation, right, SAP has already provided some standard SAP bodies. Okay, so with the help of which you can enhance the data which is being sent from ECC to EWM. So that in detail I will cover whenever we'll be doing a body session. But this is what I wanted to explain you before we move to the overview, technical overview session of SAP EWM objects. So the main thing is the decentralized and the embedded landscape. Now, since we are will be looking into the technical aspect of SAP EWM, right? I will slightly try to cover some of the above objects which could be helpful into SAP EWM. So what we will be doing is we will not be covering all the SAP ABAP object, which is regularly used into SAP ECC system for all the other module. But what we can do is we can cover some of the common objects which is regularly used into the SAP EWM world. So now, just to start with, right, I have kept object-oriented programming as my top most priority into the SAP ABAP overview. Now, why this is so? Somebody asked me a question, right, that how do we use tables to find some data entries as we usually do into SAP ECC? So now let me tell you, SAP EWM purely works on object-oriented mechanism. So like in ECC, right, for SD, MM, PP, QM module, right, we have multiple tables and with some joins. For example, SD, right, VBAK, VBAP, VBKD. So we have this sales order number as a key field, and you take the sales order number and you run through all this table to find some data. This cannot be easily done into SAP EWM world, because SAP EWM world, first of all, it purely works on classes and methods, which is an object-oriented programming. Secondly, we will have all set of tables available into SAP EWM, but to give you a brief background, right? In ECC, for example, VBAK or VBAP, VBKD, these are transparent table having, all the sales order information, and then you can, with the sales order number as a key field, you can read multiple information, right? The business part data or the line item data, header data. In SAP EWM, right? If you just go to the PRDO transaction or PRDI transaction, the set of information that you see onto this transaction, right? That information is very huge. And if you try to store all this information into the tables, right? Definitely there are tables which store this information, but these tables are what I would say, deep data sets. Okay, so technical word is the deep structure. So as you see in regular ECC boxes, the tables are purely transparent table, but in SAP EWM, you will find the table which also has deep structures into it. So that is why whenever you are trying to find some data into SAP EWM based on the tables, right, it becomes quite difficult as compared to, if you are using some classes and methods, right, to retrieve that data. That is pretty much easier. Okay, so that is what we can cover in detail, but this is I wanted to answer about the question somebody asked me about the tables, right? The reason why we do not find multiple tables, or if we find the tables, how do we read through these tables? Okay, second is related to data dictionary. That is what I was talking about, the data dictionary. Right now, from data dictionary point of view, we will have to understand what are transparent table, what are views, what are deep structure, line types, table types, these things. Because whether it is regular SAP ABAP or whether it is SAP EWM, if we are trying to build some custom object, or if we are trying to enhance some existing SAP standard object, we will have to have, you know uh, probably create a structure, a line type, a table type. In my experience, I have never created a SAP table. Yeah, there were some custom table or transparent table created, but that was purely for some business requirement. But similar to what SAP EWM provides you the table structure, right, considering the deep structure and everything, till date I have never seen a requirement to create such type of table structure. So even if we create something as part of data dictionary, it will be purely line types, table types, transparent table, that's it. Internal table, function modules. So why I am adding this internet table or function module as part of SAP ABAP overview is, as I mentioned, right, EWM purely works on, first of all, classes and methods. So most of the time, you will find either standard SAP class methods that are readily available for whatever process you want to implement. Second, if nothing is available, we straight away go and create classes and method. Now, the priority to technical object which comes below classes and methods is function module. So what happens is, if you don't find any class and method into SAP EWM to retrieve some data or to process some data, you will definitely find some function modules available. So if I can give you an example, right, if I need to create a Pikachu into SAP EWM system, so there is a class and method which is readily available to create a Pikachu. Along with the class and method, I can also find a function module to create a Pikachu. So in both ways, you will have a technical object to create a Pikachu into SAP EWM system, right? So that is why you should be familiar with the function module also, because if you are not familiar with the function module, you will not be able to create or process any of the technical areas into SAP EWM. The fourth thing, that is reports and module pool programming. Now reports will be used very minimal in SAP EWM, and it will be purely on the business requirement. But now what is module pool programming required in EWM, right? So we were talking about the RF programming. So if you know what is module pool programming into SAP ABAP, you will definitely find RF programming easy, because RF programming in SAP EWM is nothing but somewhat extension to module pool programming. So if we know the module pool programming concept, RF application is very easy to build. So it is a combination of configuration plus module pool programming. So that is why we will have to understand what is module pool programming. Then we will have to understand either smart forms or adapt forms. Now, why these forms are required? So whenever we work into SAP EWM, right, from technical point of view, there could be some requirement to build some form. That form could have some QR codes, barcode, line codes. Okay. So in order to build this objects, right, you might either go with a smart form option or Adobe form option. So in order to implement these kinds of labels, right, whether it is HU label, transportation unit label, we will have to have an understanding of smart forms and Adobe form. Okay. Business add-in, nothing but bodies, right? So bodies, we are not changing any concept of bodies. Whatever usage of bodies that we have into SAP ABAP, the similar usage is available into EWM system. Meaning what? If I need to enhance some standard SAP code with some additional programming logic, we use a business add-in. So that is similar into SAP EWM as well. Remote function call is used only when, if you are trying to process some or if you are trying to build some programming logic, which could be either talking to a third party system, or the third party system could be using this remote function call to process something into SAP EWM. So remote function call are necessary in order to implement a process where your SAP system talks to a third party system. Okay. So any questions on SAP ABAP overview before we move to SAP EWM technical overview?
Yeah, I'm good, Tisha.
Okay, thank you.
Same here.
Okay. So now, as I have explained you the SAP overview, right? ABAP overview. So that ABAP overview is a basic foundation for us to understand what we will be doing into a EWM technical thing, right? So once we understand what we are doing into SAP ABAP, that becomes your basis or a foundation for what you will be building into a SAP EWM. Now, from SAP EWM point of view, right? Whatever I have listed down, I find it as important technical object, which are the differentiating object with SAP ABAP. So in SAP ABAP, probably I would not say we do not find RF, but it is very minimal. Then PPF is not at all available in our regular RF. Monitor enhancement, business add-in, yes, we try to enhance the SAP standard logic. Easy enhancement, workbench, and interface. So I'll go through all these topics one by one. Today, I will not cover in detail, but I will try to give you a brief background of what is happening with this. Okay. Now, for RF, PPF, and monitor enhancement, I have some slides prepared for you. But for business and easy enhancement, workbench, and interfaces, there were no technique such detail that I wanted to tell you, right? So I do not have any slides for it, but I will like to, explain you what are these three technical objects that are used into EWM, right? So first of all, let us go into business add-in. So since you are already working into the SAP world, right? Usually, do you know any technique? How do you find a body into a SAP system in the SAP ECC system?
Like for EWM, all the bodies are listed in the config,
Correct.
but
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's the and you are right. So that is the major advantage if we compare it to the regular SAP ABAP, right? So in SAP ECC, from an ABAPer point of view, if we need to find some business add-ins or if we need to find some user exits, right? We will have to apply a breakpoint to see what bodies or what user exits are triggered for that process. Okay, so if it is a sales order, purchase order. So what we usually do is there is a standard class called as CL underscore exit handler. So we go and apply a breakpoint there. And as soon as you execute any of the standard transaction code, the control breaks at that CL underscore exit handler, and then there is a variable which tells you the name of the bodies which has been triggered for each and every process that you execute. Now, as you rightly said, for SAP EWM, it is very easy to find a body because what SAP has done is they have already given us a SPRO node with business add-in, and these nodes are segregated process wise. So for example, if there is a business requirement that I need to have some processing logic implemented at the time of WT creation, or the business needs some processing logic to be implemented at the time of WT confirmation, so you can straight away go and go into the SPRO node for business add-in, and under cross process settings for that business add-in node, right? You will find all the bodies which are related to WT creation, WT confirmation, WT abort. So in this way, it is very easy for you to identify a right body and straight away go and add your processing logic. So in SAP EWM world, the finding of business add-in becomes easy. Rest implementation part, it remains as it is as we do in the ABAP or the ECC system. But how do we find the business add-in is a easier part into SAP EWM. Okay, easy enhancement workbench. So I was talking about some requirement from business wherein the business can ask us to add some custom fields onto a material master or add some custom fields onto a this thing business partner. Now, in SAP ECC, when we are working with SAP ABAP module, right, we have something called as screen exits. And with the help of screen exit, we try to enhance the screen, SAP standard screen, to add some custom fields, right? Now, here are two things. Again, this screen enhancement will be divided into two parts. One is easy enhancement workbench, which purely works for the master data. So it is either the material master or the business partner. There could be some enhancement where the business requires some custom field to be added on the PRDO, PRDI, TU transaction. So that enhancement will be taking a different approach, right? So easy enhancement workbench I wanted to add in my agenda because there is a specific transaction code and a specific process that is being used to add this custom field onto the material master, which again we will be taking into or looking into detail when we go for in further in next sessions, right? But this is what I wanted to tell you. So though if you want to add some custom field into any of the master data transaction, whether it is a business partner or the material master, we straight away go and use the easy enhancement workbench. Now, in SAP ABAP, we have to find a screen exit. We have to find a proper uh, area where we can write the, first of all, add the field, then write a processing logic for that field, right? In easy enhancement workbench, it is kind of a wizard which you will have to only use that wizard, use some specific field which you wanted to add on to the material master, and rest of the things would be taken care by the SAP standard itself. So as soon as you proceed with the wizard, right, with whatever detail that has been prompted by the wizard, all the code and everything would be generated by SAP EWM itself. So that is the easiest part of having or adding some additional custom fields into the product master or business partner. Interfaces are also very important into SAP EWM because while working with SAP EWM, right, maybe you both have also experienced, it is not only always the SAP EWM system, but SAP EWM system might talk to third party system for various processes. So if I can give you an example, right, conveyor integration could be one area where either we talk to a third party system to build the conveyor, or There could be a material flow system built into the system to have this conveyor integration. So interface is very important if you wanted to have some technical background into EWM, because most of the SAP EWM system with various business processes, right? You will see some of the system definitely talking to some other system, and these are through interface. Now, just to give you an example, right? Interfaces can be of multiple types. So one can be web service call using a SOA manager. The another can be this thing, right? What I would say, the remote function call is one of the example wherein you can use this remote function call to the talking system, and they can trigger whatever operation they need. This is one. SAP XIPI could be another technology where we can interface the SAP EWM system to a third party system. So interfaces is also an important part whenever you work with SAP EWM as a technical consultant. Okay, so shall I move, or do you have any questions here?
Uh, I've got a question here.
Okay.
So SAP nowadays they recommend to use APIs,
Correct.
right? Are we going to cover APIs?
I do not have that on my agenda today, but yes, if you want, we can cover APIs also.
Okay, okay, and MFS integration, technical point of view.
Right, right.
If you're going to have a
Yeah, that's
discussion
what.
on that.
So today, why I started with this agenda is because now all this interfaces part or MSS part, right? It
Hmm.
comes into picture once you have some brief understanding of what needs to be done as a technical counterpart into SAP EWM. So I would request that let us first address these points, and then once it comes to some specific subpoints, right? For example, interfaces. There, if you need detail of MFS or APIs, right? We can cover it at that point. But
Okay,
as
fine.
your requirement is, right, in daily day-to-day life, right? If you are functional and if you have some technical understanding, again, interfaces, MFS, APIs would be at the very top level. So if there are any issues, I definitely I understand that you would be able to address that issue, but mostly the core technical person would be addressing that first. So let us start with the basic objects which are used regularly into SAP EWM world, and then let us go to this object which could be a complex area from technical point of view.
Okay.
Okay, so now for the radio frequency
So you
object or the
mentioned, Tushar, sorry, you mentioned about SOA, right?
Mhm.
So, so basically, it's a service-oriented architecture, right?
Right,
And it's, I think, the framework is BOPF,
correct, correct.
right? So, would you explain more about it? I read somewhere like it's the service-oriented architecture, but I never understood like what's the service-oriented architecture is.
Okay, so just to give you a brief background, right? Again, even if I'm talking about the service manager, right? Now, these also can be having multiple subtypes. So, just to give you a small example, which could be simple, right? Let's say I have a requirement from business wherein my SAP system wants to talk to a conveyor interface or a conveyor integration, right? Interface. So basically, the business setup is such that I have some boxes which would be moving onto the conveyor, and based on some specific information onto that box, it would be appropriately going to a proper staging lane. So there are multiple staging lane, and that box has such a information which would drive that box to a particular staging lane. Now, so there are two part, right? One is SAP EWM can feed that information to that box, but the conveyor should also be in a position to read that information from the box and then move that box to a particular lane, right? So how do we build this interface? So the simplest example that I can tell you with web service or the SOA manager is the web service call. So what happens is we can request the third party system where uh, who are responsible for this conveyor, right? We can request them for a WSDL, which is a web service development language, right? So now this WSDL is nothing but it is a wrapper of an XML or the JSON language, right? So they can build XML or JSON at their end, which would be having all the fields that would be accepting from the SAP EWM system. So for example, right, I told you for an HU, I wanted to move that HU to a particular lane. So if I'm feeding the lane information onto the HU while sending it onto the conveyor, right, the conveyor would be in a position to read all this information and move the box to a particular lane. So all this information about the lane can be integrated into a JSON or an XML language at the conveyor side. They can prepare a WSDL and then they can give that wrapper WSDL to EWM consultant. Now, as a EWM technical consultant, we can use that WSDL and we can create a service consumer proxy into EWM system. As soon as I create a service consumer proxy into EWM system, right, it will automatically generate all the classes, methods, parameters which are available into that JSON or XML file. So again, it is easy when they provide us WSDL, everything from that WSDL is extracted and SAP itself creates a class and method. Now, once we have a class and method, it becomes easy for SAP EWM technical consultant to just use that class and method and feed that information. So as soon as we feed that information to that class and method, as soon as we use this web service call, what we are doing is we are just sending this information from SAP to the third party system. Now, since the third party system knows their XML or JSON because they have their own structure built, they are able to retrieve this information, and with this information they are able to route this HU to the particular lane. So that this is the simplest form of web service architecture that we can implement. Now, this can have more subtypes, this can have more complexity, but yes, if you want, we can take each of the things in detail. But the simplest architecture is this, wherein you can have a, or you can request a WSDL file from the third party system, and using the WSDL file we can create a service consumer proxy into SAP EWM system.
Yeah, sounds good, Tushar.
Yeah, okay. So now, as I mentioned, right, RF application or radio frequency application, we can still implement this RF application in warehouse management. So have you ever seen any RF application built for warehouse management in your career?
Yeah,
You have seen,
Uh,
right?
s-
yeah, yeah.
yeah, custom applications you're talking about for the RF?
Yeah, but not into the EWM module, but the warehouse management module.
No, I
Yes.
have never worked on WM.
Okay. So now, as I said, right, RF application are not new to EWM. We still have RF application into warehouse management module. It's just that it is very, it is not used to that extensive mode, right? It is very less used because first of all, if we want to build a RF application for warehouse management, right, each and everything should be coded. So the amount of time and complexity that is required to build a RF application in warehouse management is very huge as compared to the RF application into extended warehouse management. But still, there are some business processes where they are still using warehouse management and they are still using the RF application for the warehouse management. Okay. Again, even if you are building an RF application into a warehouse management world, it is module pool programming. Okay. The only difference in SAP WM and EWM RF application is in WM, the module pool program is it is up to the core. So we will have to implement or write a code for each and everything. And that piece is replaced by configuration into SAP EWM. Now, when we will go into further sessions for RF, right, you will see that most of the RF application can be controlled through configuration. Definitely, there is a programming logic required to be written for RF application, but it's kind of a 70-30 ratio. 70% of RF application would be a configuration part, and 30% would be writing the processing logic. So this is the major difference from, for RF application in warehouse management and extended warehouse management. And in extended warehouse management, it becomes easier because most of the RF application can be controlled through configuration. Okay. Now, The before going into the sub parts of RF application, right? I would like to tell you that how does this RF application, how do we deploy this RF application onto the RF handle device? So you understood my question. So as a technical consultant, I will be building all the RF application onto a SAP GUI. Now, once this application is built, right, I will have to deploy all this application onto the RF handle device. So any one of you know that how do we deploy the RF application onto the handle device?
Yeah, display
Yeah,
profile.
okay. So have you heard about internet service?
No.
I
Okay,
think, yeah, what I've heard is we have to create an internet service using the
correct,
GUI, right? And then
correct,
you mount the HTML
correct, correct.
code on that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So before going to all this, because see, whatever I have mentioned on this slide, these are sub parts of what we will be configuring as a RF application, right? But just to give you a brief background, right? I build a RF application on SAP GUI, but the application that I build on GUI would be executed onto this handle device, which you see onto the screen, right? So how do I move that screen, which is built onto the RF GUI, to the handle device? So the mechanism is called as internet service, ITS mobile. Okay. So what happens is, as soon as I build a RF application, right, I can create a internet service using a SICF transaction. Within that internet service, I can have multiple configuration which are purely based for an RF handle device. So as soon as I have a screen generated into a SAP GUI, as soon as I have all the processing logic written for the SAP GUI, as soon as I have all the configuration for an RF application in place, what I can do is I can create a HTML version of that screen and link that screen to that internet service. The reason being is, onto the handle device, we will be executing RF application onto the browser. So the browser will always work with HTML screens, right? So whatever screen that we build on SAP GUI should be converted into HTML pages. So that HTML pages conversion will happen via SAP standard mechanism. Then we will have to assign that HTML pages to an internet service. Then whenever that internet service is being executed onto a browser, into an handle device, we will be seeing that screens that has been executed onto the RF handle device. So I wanted to explain you this because, again, if you see, right, it is an interface to a third party system, right, or the third party device, because whatever application that I am building, it is purely onto the SAP GUI. But that application, when it comes for an execution, it will be executed on a device which is a mobile device and not an SAP system, right? So this is again an interface which is built from SAP EWM for an application to be executed onto the handle device. Okay. So please remember the internet service which are important as part of the RF application. Now, when we start an RF application, right, the first and
So,
foremost,
Tushar, the code execution still happens on the GUI, or where does the
correct,
code execution happen?
correct. So
It's still
what happens?
happening on GUI. Okay.
Yes, yes, it still happens on GUI. The only thing is the HTML version is only and purely related to the screens. Okay, so with SICF, right? With SICF, we still generate a screen which calls the SAP system. Okay, so when we'll go further, I'll show you how does that works. But with SAP, what that internet service, it still calls some SAP system. Now, what happens is, when I'm working on the screen layout on SAP GUI, that layout cannot be directly executed onto the handle device. So
Right.
that should be converted to HTML pages. But the processing logic, it for even if it is an internet service mobile, right, application, that processing logic comes into SAP. So if you want to debug that also, right, we will be able to debug that. It's just that you will have to activate the debugger or the breakpoints into RF. So somebody asked me about debugging, right? So if you want to find what is going wrong with an RF application, right, first of all, you can activate a breakpoint for that particular user. Second, you can activate the trace. So these are some troubleshooting mechanism, because what happens is the issue for an application will be coming to the user who is working on the floor, right? And there is no link with the SAP system at that point of time. So if there are any issues coming to the RF application, the first way of troubleshooting the RF application is activating the trace for that particular user, right? So that can be done. Okay. So the code, just to answer, the code still triggers from the SAP program. The screen HTML version of the screens are displayed onto the handle device. Okay.
So basically, it's just a web service that is sending calls in and out of SAP, or is that how we can understand this?
No, so web service, yeah. So maybe when we are onto the system, I would be able to explain you better. But web service and internet service are totally different. Okay.
Okay.
Web service is purely you create or configure through SOA manager, you create service consumer proxy, and you talk to the third party system. Internet service is again through standard transaction code SICF. So you create an internet service. There are some configuration parameters which tells the internet service to link to what SAP system, XYZ SAP system. So the internet service knows to what SAP system it is talking, first of all. Secondly, that internet service, when we are using for an RF handled application, the HTML versions of that screen should be used as a display onto the handle device, but the programming logic still will be triggered from SAP EWM. So that whenever we are onto the screen, right, I would be able to explain you all that things.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So internet service is an important part when we work with RF application. Now, when you start building an RF application, right, the first and foremost, or the, what I would say, the configuring object for an RF application is nothing but a display profile. So say for example, a business can use one RF device into the complete warehouse, or it can use multiple RF device into the warehouse, right? So for us, each device into a warehouse should be created with a profile. Okay, so what happens is we can have one profile created or we can have multiple profile created, and whenever we are having either one device into the system or multiple device into the system, until and unless we assign a display profile to the device doesn't know what display profile to be executed. So whenever we are working with an RF application, the display profile remains at the top hierarchy of whatever configuration objects that we will be seeing, right? For RF, display profile remains at the top hierarchy. So either you enhance the existing RF application or you build an RF application from scratch. Display profile is one thing which you will have to create by reference of standard display profile, right? If you ask me, I will always suggest, because I have seen the systems where people are using standard display profile and enhancing the standard display profile. But if you ask me, I would always suggest to, copy the standard display profile into custom display profile. So it is either ZZ, Z1, Z2, Z3, whatever it is. And then whatever you want to work as part of your business requirement, right? Work on that custom display profile, because in that way you are not touching what SAP standard is providing us, right? So this is the
Right.
first
You're
hierarchy.
right,
Yeah,
Tushar. I did some of the customizations for RF.
right,
I think using SC51. So
right,
we come so that we do not touch the standard. We copied the display profile from the standard,
correct.
and then we did our customizations. Maybe it was mostly screen layout changes that we did,
Hmm.
but not any code changes. Yeah.
Correct, correct. So this is one thing that whenever we start any RF application, display profile is important, because this display profile is a setting which will be used for a device. So whenever either it is one device or multiple device into the warehouse, the display profile decides which profile needs to be activated for that particular RF application. So that is important. Now, the second level of hierarchy is a presentation profile. So if you have seen, right, we have something called as star star and star one in SAP standard EWM system. So why this star star and star one profile why it is differentiated, right? So you have heard, right? SAP EWM offers a voice application, right? Voice picking application. So whenever we are seeing a star one profile, that is nothing but a voice application profile, and star is a standard profile. So again, whenever you are working with SAP RF application to have or to build the business specific requirement, again my suggestion is all these nodes, right, or all these objects that I have given here: display profile, presentation profile, personalization profile, please create custom profiles and then work on it. Please do not change standard. And if you both have observed, right, I'm not sure whether you have seen or that or not, but in SAP EWM, SAP allows you to change standard profiles. Have you observed that?
Yeah, but it gives a warning message that
Correct,
you're
correct,
changing the standard. Yeah.
correct. So it's always better to create a copy of this profile and work on our custom profile, because if anything goes wrong and if we are going back to SAP, right, SAP still has some references of their standard to compare what has gone wrong into the custom application, right? So that is always my suggestion, to have all the profile created custom. Now, do you know why do we have presentation profile and personalization profile as separate profiles into SAP EWM system?
I think presentation profile is more to modify the menus, menu paths, and
Mhm.
personalization profile is for uh,
If you want to restrict a group of people or
You're
group
right.
of
You're right.
users.
So what happens is, say for example, I have a business requirement. Okay, so I build a RF application with inbound, outbound, replenishment, physical inventory. Now business comes and tells me, so all this display profile. So first of all, display profile I'll assign to the device. Presentation profile I will have to assign to the user, right? So sorry, personalization profile will have to assign to a user, and presentation profile and personalization profile is a combination which I will be using to create the logical transaction and logical step for an RF application. Now everything is built. Now the business comes with a requirement. Okay, I have this five set of people, right, which would be only performing inbound process. So for this five set of user, they should not be seeing the outbound menu at all, replenishment menu at all, right, this button. Similarly, he have some couple of people, right, who would be only executing replenishment, some people who would be executing only outbound. Now in our regular SAP ABAP world, right, what we usually do is we have authority objects, correct? So that authority objects restricts from executing some transaction code. Here we do not have any transaction code, right? SAP RFUI is a standard transaction code which directly brings into menu. Now if I execute a menu and then I try to restrict something, then that will be wrong, because then I'm showing something and still restricting it. So personalization profile is that restricting parameter, wherein if you see, right, all the menus are built based on the combination of display profile, presentation profile, and personalization profile. So what you can have is, you can have one custom presentation profile and multiple personalization profile. For this multiple personalization profile combination, you can have that menu created as per the business requirement, and then whatever set of user the business is giving, right, to the user setting, you just assign that personalization profile, so that whenever that user logs into an RF application, he will be seeing only that menu. Okay, so this authorization kind of a thing, right, is managed through personalization profile in the RF applications. Okay, then comes the resource maintenance. Again, resource maintenance and user maintenance are important in the RF application, because without that we will not be able to execute any RF application, right? So we will have to have a resource which is either your ID, then you will have to assign some resource type and everything for that particular resource, and in the user you will have to assign the warehouse number and the personalization profile. So with all these settings, right, you can have an RF application up and running onto the handle device. Any questions on this?
No.
Okay, now I'll move to the second important technical part in EWM, right? So post processing framework. I believe you both know NACE transaction into SAP ECC,
Yes.
correct? So the use of NACE transaction probably is to either print some application, or to have some processing logic written into a subroutine, and then there are various communication method, right? It is either fax, email, printing, right? So SAP PPF or post processing framework, the basic phenomena of post processing framework is nothing but the NACE transaction. Of course, it comes with some additional advantages, but if you compare, right, because sometimes people find it difficult, what is ppf, what is ppf, what is ppf. Ppf is nothing but a NACE transaction into SAP ECC. So whatever you do in ppf, so whatever you do in NACE transaction, you can do it into the ppf, but with a different approach and an additional features. Okay, so similar to what we have in NACE, we can print it, we can fax it, email it, we can trigger a workflow. Similar things you can do it into a ppf. The only difference between NACE and PPF is, first of all, PPF has a structure which is called as action definition, action profile, right? And then to the action definition, you will have all this specific action where you can either try to assign an Adobe form, a smart form, you can try to print that, you can try to email that. And the one of the important thing is nothing but the method call. Okay. So apart from just printing anything, right, this ppf transaction provides us an opportunity to process some logic whenever a document is created, whenever a document is saved. So we have something called as a method call in ppf, right? That method call is nothing but it gives you an opportunity to write a custom specific programming logic and to use that ppf in various areas, right? And to execute some business requirement processing logic whenever you are using that transaction code. So it can be either PRDI, PRDO, TU transaction, right? So action profile, action definition, and the action events or the action type that can be used into PPF, right? Apart from these action definition, action profile, and the method call that I was explaining, right? The second important aspect of the PPF is the schedule condition and the start condition. So do you have any background of what is schedules condition and start condition?
Yeah.
Okay. So just to give you a brief overview of schedule condition, start condition, right? So what happens is whenever we define an action definition into PPF, right, there are multiple settings. And again, will go into detail of each and every settings, but just to give you a brief background, right? There are two parts, right? One part is whenever I execute a transaction and whenever there is a ppf which is being configured for that particular process, right? First of all, that ppf should be picked up and kept into a pool of execution pool of ppf actions, right? And then whenever, based on whatever settings we have, right, either it is on save of document, either using it is a either with the transaction code or something, right, this ppf should be executed. So there are two parts. One is the pool of all executable ppf action, and the other part is the execution of ppf. So whenever we have a schedule condition, right, schedule condition always brings the action definition to the pool of executionable action definition, right, whenever the condition is met. Start condition always triggers the ppf from the pool of executable action definition whenever the start condition is met. Now these two conditions, right, either you can have these two conditions working independently or you can have these two conditions working dependently. So it is not mandatory to have both conditions. So you can have schedule condition, then the start condition could be triggered based on how you define the settings for the action definition. You can have directly a start condition, then the schedule condition will be defined based on the settings that you have defined into the action definition. Okay, so start condition, schedule condition is important parameter. The action definition, the processing logic that that you, or the processing method, I would say, that you use at the time of action definition is very important when we work with PPF. Okay, so PPF again, you can enhance the SAP standard PPF, plus you can trigger or create a completely custom PPF application. Okay, again, this we will go into detail, but this is a high level overview of PPF. So if you have any questions, maybe you can go ahead and ask.
So basically, schedule condition schedules an action that will be processed at some point of time, and
Mhm.
if there's no start condition, and it'll be processed. So it does not need a condition to start, right? If
Correct.
it's not defined, but if the condition is there, if the start condition is there, then that condition needs to be fulfilled for that scheduled condition or scheduled PPF to be processed successfully.
Okay, so in simple language, right, I'll explain you. So
Uh-huh.
I have a bucket, right? So now in PPF, right, I have multiple action definitions. So even if, let us take an example of PRDO transaction. In PRDO also, there are multiple standard SAP PPF action profiles and definition, which could be processed on different processing steps, right? Now, let us consider that I am executing a PRDO transaction and I have an empty bucket. Okay, so if there are some schedule condition maintained for some of the action definition for the PRDO, right? Whenever that condition is triggered, right, that action definition will be kept picked up and put it into a bucket. It is still not executed, but it is into a bucket which will be executed later on. Okay, now say for example you have an action definition which has a schedule condition. So SAP system picked that action definition, it brought into that bucket. For that action definition you also have a start condition. So that particular action definition will not be executed until and unless the start condition is met. So even if your processing methods are when saving document, add commit work, whatever it is, whenever the start condition is satisfied, then only this action definition will be triggered. So this is one part. Second part, I do not have any schedule condition, but I have a start condition. So what happens is, whenever there is no schedule condition, right, what SAP will do is, based on his standard sequence of steps, right, if it finds that action definition, it will pick that action definition and put it into the bucket. And as soon as the start condition is met, it will execute the action definition from that bucket. Okay. Now, third is I do not have any action definition. I do not have any scheduling condition. I do not have any start condition. So this purely works on your action definition setting. So if your action definition says that, okay, my PPF should be triggered while saving the document, what SAP will do is, when SAP comes to that point, for example, WT creation, right? So in PRDO transaction, we can have a process where the SAP creates a WT. So when SAP meets that WT creation point, it picks up all the action definition which are related to WT creation and it keeps into the bucket. As soon as we hit save and a commit work is triggered, all the action definition will be triggered or executed. So please remember that schedule condition and start condition. So schedule condition is picking the action definition and putting it into the pool of executable action definition. Start condition is telling SAP system to trigger and process this PPF. Okay, so if both these conditions are not, again, these two are not mandatory to have in each action definition, but if you are giving it, it will be purely restricted based on condition. If you are not having any schedule condition or start condition, whenever SAP encounters the PPF into a sequence of operation, it will pick that action definition, and based on the processing method that you have added into the action definition, based on that it will be triggering the PPF action. Okay.
So sorry,
So,
Tushar, I might have missed it. Let's say if the start conditions is not there,
mhm,
so it'll be triggered at the time of like how we have defined, right? Maybe on saving or maybe on the through a report.
selection report, yes. So just to
Yeah,
give you an
okay.
example, right, you do not have a start condition and the action definition says, okay, selection report. So what happens is, you execute the PRDO transaction, it will bring the PPF into the pool, right? So even if you go to the PRDO transaction and PPF log, right, you will see that PPF action triggered, but you will not see that PPF action green, because you will have to go to the PPF report and execute that action manually, because our setting says that it is using a selection report. If your setting said that it is while saving the document, so as soon as you hit save, whenever the first commit work is triggered into the program, all the PPF action definition which are available into that queue, which are pending for triggering or execution, everything will be executed at one go. So it purely depends on how and what settings you do onto the action definition.
Yeah, got it, Dashant. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I had that points for PPF. The third most important part from my point of view in SAP EWM related to the technical area is monitor enhancement. So maybe in your career also, right, you must have seen that there are multiple requirements from the business to enhance the SAP standard monitor to bring in some uh, what additional selection or input criterias or additional columns onto the layout or additional functionalities, right, which is currently not available onto the SAP standard system. So I hope you have these requirement and you have seen this requirement, right? So all these requirements related to monitor enhancement can be tackled through the monitor enhancement area. Okay, so this also, whenever we will go into each section detail by detail, I would be in a situation to explain you practically onto the system. But again, just to give you a high level overview, whenever we are working onto a monitor enhancement, again, my first request and suggestion would be always copy the standard monitor into a custom and then work on it, so that we are not touching the standard monitor. Okay, and then whenever we are working with monitor, right, there are 3 to 4 important aspects when we work on monitor. First is the node profile object class, right? These 3 to 4 object, first of all build the layout of the monitor, and then for the processing of that layout, right, we always have the list type, function module, form type, and form structure. So list type, nothing but it tells me what will be the information that either I would be displaying onto the screen or having it onto the input screen for selection. And function module is always used to write a processing logic, right? So these 3 to 4 are very important parameters whenever you work with SAP monitor. Again, this we will check in detail, but first of all, whenever there is a requirement to have monitor enhancement, I would suggest to go ahead and create a custom monitor, and then based on that custom monitor, you try to enhance your monitor based on the business requirement. Okay, so any questions on the monitor enhancement?
I'm good, Dashant.
Okay, so that's it I had for the session today. I think now I'll open the floor for questions. So if I had missed anything from the start, right, the list of the question that you have asked, maybe you can go ahead and ask that question and I'll try to answer that questions.
So, Tushar, any other kind of enhancements that you've done, like which are not related to monitor, RF or PPF? Like, let's say to the normal process, let's say some some requirements that for picking which are not fulfilled by the standard.
Right, so I'll tell you. So whatever my technical experience, right, in so many years, I'll tell you, whenever you work with SAP EWM module as a technical consultant, right, uh, 70% of the technical object or the technical work is related to RF. Okay, and rest of the 30% comes into your PPF, monitor enhancement, easy enhancement workbench. So just to answer your question, I do have no, a working experience on voice picking. So I had implemented a voice pick application again that was integrating or interfacing with a third party interface or third party system. So what we had done is, today the business is successfully, so first of all we have successfully implemented the voice application, and business is really seeing the comparison. So when they have two users, right, one user who is picking with the RF handle device and the other user who is picking with voice, right, they are clearly seeing the efficiency, because the user who is picking with voice, right, is more efficient and more quick as compared to RF. So that is one application that I have worked right from scratch for a voice pick. And now we are also into a process to bring some of the RF menus, right? So if you see, right, SAP also has provided a template of voice picking only. Rest of the menus, right? SAP also has not given any voice application, but now we are also into process to bring some of the RF application as part of voice application, because the business is seeing a higher efficiency into voice. So that is
So, but
one
Tushar,
area.
like, how is like just trying to understand, like, how is voice picking more efficient than the RF? Because see, I'm not questioning your
Mhm,
credibility, but I'm questioning
mhm,
the understanding. Like, let's say if you're scanning a barcode,
mhm.
wouldn't that be more quicker than like maybe saying a bin or maybe the HU number, which is too long?
Okay, so I'll tell you what happens basically in voice, right? So you are right. First of all, your question is very right that bin is such a long string, and how does the user, you know, says or scan that bin. So have you ever seen that we have something called as verification field into the bin master? So if you go to LS03
Right, right,
transaction,
right.
right,
Yeah,
there
I
is a
understand. Yeah, yeah,
verification field. So that is an
yeah.
alphanumeric field, which is three-digit alphanumeric field. Okay.
Right.
So first of all, there is no need to user to say the complete string for that bin. So it's either you say that three-digit character or you scan it. So this is one. Secondly, right, in RF, in voice picking, it's purely your voice communication. So the number of scans are completely reduced in voice picking. So say for example, so it's material master or quantity or HU scan, right? So here in voice picking, majorly it comes with QR code that we have implemented. So once it is QR code, in one scan we have multiple inputs, right? So it is product, batch, now quantity. So for quantity, voice just tells you what, the pick 3, pick 5. So for me as a picker, it is okay, 5, okay. So that happens quick as compared to a scan. Okay, so that these are some smaller areas, right, where the business has really observed that the voice pickers are efficient as compared to handle device. And let me tell you that also, right? So now what the business is trying to do is, business is trying to completely reduce the handle device and bring in more voice application or the voice device. So now, if the earlier ratio was what, 80/20, right, 80 as an handle device and 20 as an voice device, now that has been completely reversed. The business is now bringing in more voice device as compared to the handle device. So that is one area I have worked on. Interfaces, I have worked on multiple interfaces using web service architecture, using RFC function modules. So that is one I have worked on. Monitor enhancement, multiple monitor. I have also have a working experience on business rule framework, BRF. Have you heard of BRF?
Yes, yes, Tushar. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are some areas where we have used BRF, created some rule sets, and we were using this rule sets into SAP EWM. And this is mostly into the transportation unit whenever we are having international orders and we're creating a TU, right? So mostly the BRF part is used in that area. So that working experience also I have. Any other
You
question? Yeah.
Yeah, one more question, Tushar. You have any questions? I don't know. I think you were
Yeah,
going to ask
you
something.
go ahead, you go ahead, you go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, other question, Tushar, is Like how would you structure your course and like each session? Just want to understand that.
So that is what now I maybe I'll talk to Sai, but then see, you are from functional background, right? And your requirement is completely different, right? As I understood in the start of this meeting, right? Majorly, you need some technical background, but the first and foremost use of that technical background would be some troubleshooting, right? Rather than going and coding something. Correct? If I'm understanding it right, or you will be involved in coding somewhere in future.
No.
No, no, we will be like
Is it?
I don't know
Sorry.
about Arun. Yeah, but yeah, for me, Tushar, yeah, I would love to.
Okay, okay.
So it's not just simply like going through the tables or debugging or
Mhm.
because RF is usually heavily in my like organization that I'm
Correct,
working.
correct.
So I would definitely would want to learn like how to build custom RF applications.
Yeah, so definitely whatever your requirement is, right? I think we will be having that on our list of syllabus. So whatever ABAP overview or EWM overview that I have given, right? Definitely we will be covering all that points in detail. But if you have some additional point, you can let Sai know so that we can try to cover that points also. But why I wanted to keep ABAP overview and EWM overview in today's agenda, because I just wanted to compare, right? Because if you are going for RF, if you are going for PPF, so you should know what is module pool programming. If you are going for function module classes method, you should know how function module works into ECC. You should know how object oriented program is implemented. Because let me tell you, EWM is purely object oriented program. In ECC at
Right,
least we have that, we can have that liberty of going and coding some in the orthodox fashion, but here that doesn't work. So you will always have to have a processing logic written similar to what we do into the object oriented program.
right, right,
So that is one major area. So that's what, right? If you are going into a core programmer role, right, or the programmer role wherein you will have to write some piece of code, then you will have to try and understand the object oriented programming concept. You will have to try and understand how module pool works into ECC, right? Because that again is a reference for us to understand RF into EWM, or
hmm,
business add-ins is a reference to understand how we can implement bodies into EWM. So
right,
whatever topics we are trying to cover in overview above, that are basically references for us into EWM. And let me tell you again, apart from that talking, there are so many things into ABAP which I would like not to cover that topic, because again that would not make any sense into EWM. So for you, EWM technical part is important.
yeah, yeah, Tushar. I am not interested into like learning
Yeah.
core app, only what is applicable to EWM. And the
Correct.
next topic would be like to if you can go over some use cases for the PPF,
Right, right,
right?
right.
If you're scheduling some filters or scheduling some baddies for PPFs, like how
Mhm.
we are doing that and how we are implementing it, all those things.
Correct. I think let us take that step by step approach.
Yes.
Because first, let us start by, so first of all, let us start by understanding what is required from ABAP point of view. Then let
Hmm.
us start by RF application, which is a major area of development into SAP EWM, and then
Hmm.
subsequently
Hmm.
let us go to PPF monitor enhancement, which again comprises a very little business requirement. But I'll tell you, maybe as per your experience, right? How
Hmm.
many custom PPF have you built or implemented into your business requirement?
We have one custom PPF which is which has very heavy logic on it. What we are
Okay.
doing is based on the GR for PP module, like
Hmm.
based on the production GR, we are calling a PPF or triggering a PPF that
Mm-hmm.
um that is processed by a selection report. It's not processed as soon as the GR is done.
Hmm.
So we have a batch job running that processes um, that PPF, which consumes the materials which has been for which the GR has been done. let's say if I'm preparing a finished good, so and
Mhm.
I need like 5 materials, so that GI will be done through a selection report. So that
Correct.
is the PPF, custom PPF that we have.
No, correct. But that's what, right? The intent of me asking you this question is in your whole business requirement, you
Hmm.
implemented only one custom PPF. So that's what,
Only
right?
one custom. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So whenever we work with EWM, from technical point of view, majority development work is RF. PPF,
RF.
yes, we implement PPF, but if you ask me, right, either there are enhancement to the standard action definition, or
Uh-huh.
it's very rare that you completely go and create a custom profile, custom action definition. That is very rare. Most of the
Right.
time, we go and try to enhance the standard action definition either with a body call or a smart
Hmm.
form, whatever it is. So
Hmm.
that is one easy enhancement workbench. Again, it is very low if the business has some requirement to add some custom field onto the material master, right, or the
Hmm.
business partner. So that easy enhancement workbench helps there. Monitor enhancement, if you ask me, again it depends on business to business, but definitely most of the businesses for reporting purpose, right, they require something which SAP standard as of now doesn't provide, right? So there are some
Right.
additional input filters which SAP standard monitor doesn't have. There are some additional columns which SAP standard doesn't have, right? So SAP monitor enhancement is also a major area from my point of view where the business comes up with multiple requirements. Because that is a one-stop transaction for all the movement into the warehouse, right? So that is a monitoring transaction where you monitor everything what is happening into the warehouse. So if that is efficient and that is flexible for the user, right, which gives more details to them. So I have seen that business comes up with more requirement on the monitor also to have some additional details which SAP doesn't as of now provide. So I think we
Yeah,
can
that
take
is true.
first up
That is
approach
true. Yeah.
and let's see where we land.
Yeah. You no, no, no. The reason I'm asking is like I have attended training sessions in the past,
Okay.
so it's more like theoretical. So unless like we take a deeper dive or understand how the code is written, we would not be able to just theoretically we would not be able to learn anything. That's what
Right.
my understanding is.
Right.
Unless until and unless you like dip your hands into it and make
No,
your
I
hand dirty with
completely agree. And yeah,
yeah.
I'll have a
You know
discussion
how
with
SAP
you
is,
on.
right? I
Yes,
mean, there can be tons of functionality, and
correct,
until and
correct,
unless you
correct,
use it,
correct.
there's
No,
no
I
yeah,
completely agree. And practical session works better because first of all, you visualize something, you see onto the screen, you understand something because that doesn't happen in theoretical. So I also believe in practical session also, and mostly interactive session, right, with this practical thing. So I'll talk to Sai
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. It can go hand in hand. Like we can have
yes,
some theoretical concepts,
yes,
and you can go over their implementation or usage. So
right.
yeah.
Okay then. So I think if we are not
So
having any
Tushar, how
additional,
long will how long will be the course and topics you have already shared, what you'll be covering in? How long would it
yes,
be?
but
Like
I think let me, talk to Sai and try to revise that topic. Let's see, because whatever I have covered today in agenda, definitely we will be having all that points in
mhm,
detail. But if we want, we will have to have some additional topics included into it.
sure. Yeah.
So maybe I'll work on that with Sai.
Okay. Okay. No worries. Yeah.
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 Okay then, Sai.
Yeah. Are
Over
there
to
any
you.
questions from you?
Sorry.
Any questions from you? Okay. Good.
No, like I mean, I just wanted to ask something about RFC calls. Anyways, that I can talk or ask this question when we connect
Okay.
tomorrow or when it is.
No,
Okay.
if you
Okay.
want, you can go ahead. You need to ask that now, Arun. It's fine. You
Yeah,
can go
like I
ahead.
mean, see, when we say like I mean RFC calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I heard from one of our technical lead is that RFC calls happens only between SAP systems. So
Mm-hmm.
if it is non-SAP system, because we wanted to have all this QRFC logs and other stuffs,
Mm-hmm.
managed and monitored through SMQ2.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way we can have these calls uh, from external
Yes.
system,
So I'll
non-SAP system?
give you a simple example, Arun. And see, I gave you an example of an interface where we could expect some WSDL from third party system so that we can use and create a service consumer proxy, right?
Yeah.
The exact reverse is also possible. So you can create a RFC function module, Arun, into the
Mm,
system. You can
mm.
create a WSDL for that into SAP system.
Okay.
Okay. So what happens is now you have a wrapper for your RFC function module. And this WSDL, you can give it to the third party system. So as soon as the third party system uses your WSDL, right, or calls this WSDL, the RFC
Mm.
function module that you have written, right, the processing logic will be triggered for that.
Okay.
So two-way communication is definitely possible. And so I completely agree whatever your team lead said, that mostly RFC function modules are used to communicate between SAP systems only. But definitely, if you want some RFC function module to be created and to be used by some other system, you
Mm.
can create a WSDL, a service definition class for that, and give that WSDL to the third party system. Whenever they call this WSDL, your program or the processing logic written into that RFC function module will be triggered. Okay. Second question was, can you have queue? Yes, definitely you can create custom queue into this RF function module. So you can write a processing logic to create a queues. So as soon as your processing logic is triggered, right, the queues will
Mm.
be created into the system, and you can definitely find that into SMQ2 and Q1.
Okay. We are
So
more worried about monitoring the stuffs in S4 system, so that's the reason why.
right, right. So you can have queue. The second easiest option that I can tell you is, and I completely agree, right? Because troubleshooting sometimes becomes very difficult into SAP EWM. So
Yeah.
what, being a technical consultant, what I do, I'll tell you, right? Whenever I implement anything, right, I try to have a detailed step-by-step application log. Okay. So what
Mm.
I usually do is, whenever there is any enhancement, whenever there is any custom application logic written, right, you create
Mm.
a SLG1 log with a custom object, sub-object, and the external number. So in that
Mm.
way, whenever anything goes wrong, right, if you are working for inbound, you have some specific object, sub-object, and external number could be either the warehouse number, warehouse task number, HU number, whatever identifier you decide. So
Mm.
if anything goes wrong in any of the process, right, you have all these identifiers, and when you go to SLG1, when you put in all this identifier, you see a detail log. So that is what I usually prefer. But again,
Mm.
queues are one of the mechanism for having a log, or having a data into the queue. So these
Mm.
are multiple things where you can try and code something to have this troubleshooting.
Okay. Okay. We just wanted to like come and give access to the users, right, so that they can go look at the error and reprocess it as and when needed.
No, but correct. But if you ask me, right, how frequently? So are you talking about some key users into the business, or so there are some levels, right? So there are some user who works on floor. There are some supervisor for this user. There are some team leaders, key users. So in maybe in your business requirement, are you trying to give some access to the key users, and will they
Yes, I mean, the
able
access will be
to?
given to the key user. I mean, if I
Okay.
give an example,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I mean, the production receipts from
Mm-hmm.
MES system
Okay.
that goes into a middleware called Del Boomi. So that's
Okay.
what our client is going to use,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll be getting that info from that middleware to S4 system.
Okay.
So we kind of like I mean want it to be RFC or a synchronized one rather going with asynchronized approach.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do so, we were kind of like I mean planning to have AIF in between
Okay.
to record these error messages and other things. But what business they're currently doing, they
Mm-hmm.
are using SAP MII. Now that
Mm-hmm.
we are replacing that system with a new system
Mm-hmm.
because new company has acquired that I mean those
Okay.
particular plants. Now, what they want to just like get rid of SAP MII, which is currently their middleware system, and replace that with old dated Dell Boomi. Their own
Mhm.
system. So with
Okay.
that, the expectation from users is like with SAP MII in between, they have got QRFC in place.
Okay.
So the end users go there. If they encounter any issues, they go there, they see what is the error. If they can fix it, they fix it and retrigger. If not, they'll raise it to IT.
Mm-hmm.
So this
Understood.
is
No, I understand. So yeah, I completely agree that with SAP and having multiple interface, the troubleshooting becomes
mm,
a very tedious job. Okay. Any other questions?
no, I'm all good.
Okay, then I'll have a word with Sai and then maybe we can come back.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.